Welcome to the 50/50 Women on Board Chicago Midwest event, Conversation on Board Diversity. I'm Annette Martinez, one of the co-chairs for Chicago Midwest, and you'll get to meet Jennifer soon. We are delighted to have you all here today to discuss how we can lead the way to diverse and gender-balanced boards. We would love, first of all, to thank our amazing leadership committee that has been working for the last several months to bring this event to you. And we know that you will all benefit from their hard work. Another big thank you to our coaches and directors that you will be meeting later today for some smaller group discussions. You are in for a treat as they share their personal experiences and you engage in conversations about this important topic. And finally, to our sponsors that have made all of this possible. Our global sponsors, BNY Mellon, Ernst & Young, Twitter, Bank of America, MasterCard, Kaiser Permanente, Marsh, Citizens, Equilar, and McKinsey & Company. And we were especially fortunate to have three leaders from three of those organizations on our leadership committee: Stacy Coleman from BNY Mellon, Trelise Evans from Ernst & Young, and Delana Brand from Twitter. And our Chicago Midwest sponsors, State Farm Insurance, CUNA Mutual Group, Associated Bank, Casey's, Franklin Templeton, Denton's, and Northwestern Mutual. And a little shout out to my State Farm colleagues on the phone today. Glad to have you. Jennifer, to you.
Thanks, Annette. Good afternoon. Good evening. I'm Jennifer Knorr. As Annette said, I'm one of also the co-chairs of the Chicago Midwest 50/50 Women on Boards committee. And I am just so delighted to be here. And I echo Annette's warm welcome to the Conversation on Board Diversity. Really want to express my gratitude to our committee, our sponsors, and the entire 50/50 Women on Boards team. We could not do it without you, so thank you. I'm going to quickly cover some housekeeping and agenda items. So first, housekeeping. Just for if you have any technical challenges or any issues at all, don't fear. We have a team on standby to help you. So just email events@5050womenonboards.wob.com and they will help you out. Also, you'll see we have a chat feature. Feel free to chat with the participants and get those conversations going. However, save those fantastic, insightful questions for your breakouts, because then you'll be able to have a rich dialogue with your director coach, someone who's been there, done that. We won't be able to answer all of your questions and with the panelists. So those are the quick housekeeping items. Now I'd love to just go through the agenda. First, we have some amazing statistics to share what's going on nationally and also what's happening here in the Midwest on board diversity. And no one other than Betsy Berkemir-Kadir, the CEO of 50/50 Women's on Boards, is going to share that. Then we're going to have an amazing VIP panel discussion who's going to share their personal insights and their journeys to the board, as well as leading the way to advancing diversity. I can't wait. And then finally, we'll have our breakout sessions with those real corporate directors, those coaching and networking tips, really helping us learn those techniques and be able to have that dialogue and networking about how to get on boards. So before I turn it over to Betsy, I just really want to thank her for all of her support. She's been fantastic, and we could not have done it without her and all of the 50/50 Women on Boards team. Betsy?
Very kind of you to say, Jennifer, and thank you both. Thank you, Annette, for all the work that you've done as co-chairs this year. It's a fantastic event. I'm delighted to be here. I'm the CEO of 50/50 Women on Boards, and that's our new name this year. You might recall in years past, we were 2020 Women on Boards. The campaign started in 2010, and we accomplished our first goal, which was 20% by the year 2020. So we, in January, changed our name to 50/50 Women on Boards, and now we are consistently and proactively presenting the business case to companies and to women who can forge their pathway to get on corporate boards with the information that we share. And I like to think that not too long in the future, because we don't know how long it's going to take to get to 50/50 Women on Boards, where women are holding 50% of the board seats in all the all the public companies in the U.S. and maybe even globally. But I just hope that in the not too distant future, people will look back at an all male, all white board and just as if they were looking at a Model T Ford back in the last century. What an anachronism that would be, and not at all good for business, of course. So I'm really pleased that we have had such significant results with the campaign. And Chicago Midwest is one of 30 events that we are putting on last week, this week, and next week to share with the world what our progress has been and engage with women from everywhere as to their advancing their own careers to corporate boards. And this year we have new events in Athens, Greece, and in Toronto. And of course, we've had international events in London and Madrid and Mexico City for years, and delighted to continue that. So I couldn't be more pleased with our progress. And I'd like to simply share with you that, you know, we used to feel that we were just voices in the dark all alone. But as you all know, over the last several years, we've had a lot of support with the institutional investors really behind the effort. Goldman Sachs, BlackRock, CalPERS, CalSTRS, the New York State Pension Fund, Rodrigo and the Illinois State Pension Fund, all focused on getting more women and people of color and underrepresented communities onto boards. Because Credit Suisse research has shown for years that companies do perform better, are more productive, more profitable, and the workforce is better engaged when there are at least 3 women on the boards. And so that's what our goal is. And I'm delighted to present our first slide with our nationwide statistics, because we are ecstatic about the progress. The reports that we're giving are quarterly and annually. We utilize the research done by our partner Equilar to present key findings in our Gender Diversity Index. And that index is available to you on our website, 5050wob.com. So quarterly now, we are analyzing all the companies in the Russell 3000 as to how many women are on their corporate boards. And we are also tracking the number of women selected for new boards, new seats. And we are doing our best to track women of minority women and persons of underrepresented communities. So let's show our first slide, which is the biggest news. Ecstatic to let you know that we have reached the highest number in history. On the bottom bar here, the red line is 2021 this year, and the gray bar is last year. And we have reached 25.6% of all the board seats in the Russell 3000 being held now by women. And that is 3 points higher than last year, which is a year-over-year increase greater than any of the previous 5 years. And you'll note that there are about 27,000 board seats of the Russell 3000, give or take 10 per board. And of those 27,000, only 7,000 are held by women. This is nationwide, but that is 25.6%, and that is the highest that we women have ever achieved historically, ever. So we're heading in the right direction. And then in Illinois, if we can go further, our Illinois percentage of women on boards is really better than the national average. We're at 26.1%. So congratulations to Illinois. And that's 3 points higher than it was last year, similar to nationwide's increase. And of in the Russell 3000 in Illinois, there are 1,210 board seats. See the top bar, which is just about the same as last year. But of those, the number of women directors has increased pretty much significantly, from 282 board members last year who are women to 316 this year. Again, it's 26.1%. So higher than ever before, and making good progress. So nationwide, in Iowa, forgive me, I wanted to look also at the Iowa statistics. As you'll see, we've reached in Iowa 31% of the board seats as an increase from 28% last year. Fewer companies, of course, And next slide, Michigan, we're at 28.5%. Now that's really very high, because the highest in the country are California and Washington, where there are, Washington State, where there are laws requiring more women on boards. And those numbers at Washington and California are 29%. And just under that is Michigan at 28%. And that's a significant rise from 24% last year. And in Wisconsin, we're at 25.5%, right at the national level, but an increase of 3% since last year. And nationwide, I wanted to share with you that we also look at our goal of gender balance, 50-50 women on boards. And surprisingly, it's nice to know that there are 7% of the Russell 3000 companies already at gender balance. And we've just really been proactively pressing the issue for gender balance in recent months. So 215 out of the almost 3,000 companies on the Russell 3000 are already gender balanced. Really good news. And 34% of the companies nationwide already have 3+ women on their boards. That's at least 3 women on their boards. And those with 2 women, 1 woman, or 0 women are fewer now because of the increase in the 3+ category and gender balance. So we're also pleased that the companies that don't have any women on the boards are really down to 4% and continuing to dwindle as they should. In Illinois, the company rankings are 5% already gender balanced. And you'll see the number of companies almost at 42% of those that have 3 women or more. Let's go to the next slide. What it will take for all Illinois companies to get to the point of being gender balanced will be from 262 to 460 new board members. Now that means 262, the lower number, is if a woman replaces a man who has stepped down or retired from a board. But the 460 number would be if all boards stayed the same in the Russell 3000 and added woman or 2 or 3 in order to get to gender balance. So for Illinois, I think you can make that number in the next few years, 460 more women being added to your boards. Not too difficult for Illinois to achieve. And in Iowa, 3 out of 14 companies are gender balanced. 3 out of the 14 companies that are in the Russell 3000. Which is a reduction from last year. I guess we lost a couple of companies. Next slide. And for Iowa to become gender balanced, it'll take 22 to 40 new women on boards. Next. And Michigan, the number of gender balanced companies went down a point, but the number of 3+, those with 3 or more women on the boards, have increased significantly to 42% from 28. So I think that's the best number on this slide. And for Michigan companies to achieve gender balance, from 85 to 152 is the range of women needed. Wisconsin, very few gender balanced companies. Looks like there was one, and it left the state or something, but still the number of women or 3+ companies is significant, 43%. And for Wisconsin, I guess we still need 83 to 146 women on boards to be gender balanced. And lastly, we wanted to share with you that only 12% of all directors are men and women of color. Men of color are 7%, women of color are 4% nationwide. And it's important that these numbers are self-identified persons of racial or ethnic backgrounds. And we hope that as more women and people of color are added to boards, that they will self-identify with their race and ethnic backgrounds. And next slide, last slide, is showing the dramatic graphic numbers here, dividing the different ethnic and racial backgrounds so that you can see that when separated, the numbers are very, very low. So we encourage all board members and prospective board members to fill out their board profile on Equilar. And it's called Board Edge, and you can look up equilar.com. And that way you can identify whether you're a potential candidate or a board director already, identify what boards you serve on and identify your racial and ethnic background. And that way Equilar can keep a better track of the progress that we're making on corporate boards. So that was covering the whole Midwest. Took a little longer than just one state, but thanks for your patience. I hope you are encouraged by these numbers, and you can check them out, all states in the country, on our website, 5050wob.com. So with that, I'd like to turn the microphone over to Denise Cade, our moderator for today, longtime friend. Hello, Denise.
Good afternoon, Betsy. So nice to be here. Thank you for all the work that you do. And it was really great to see those statistics because the Midwest is making some progress, and I think we're proud of that. So without further ado, I will be introducing you to our esteemed panel today to really dig into some of the issues around diversity on boards. I currently serve on the board of Teledyne Technologies, and I also serve on the board of Phillips 66. I'll be introducing our panel. First, we have Kathleen Lagati, and she serves on the board of PPG Industries, Lear, and Carpenter Technology. We have Christiana Shi. She serves on the board of Mondelez International, as well as UPS. And Lear as well. I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that. That was Kathleen. So we have Christiana is on Mondelez International and UPS. Also welcoming you this afternoon to Sanjay Khosla. He serves on the board of Zoetis, as well as a number of private boards. And last but not least, we have Helene Gale, and she serves on the board of Coca-Cola, Palo Alto Networks, Oregon, and Go Health. Good afternoon, everyone.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Okay, I'm going to get started here. So obviously, we've talked about our theme for this year is leading the way to diverse and gender balanced boards. We applaud all of our panelists today for the work that they're doing for this important goal. So can you please share with us, the audience, me, what practices or ideas that you have put into place or seeded to attract a diverse board? So we want to start with you, Helene. You want to give us some of your experiences with this very important effort.
Great, and it's wonderful to be with my panelists, with you, and to be part of this incredible gathering. So I guess, first of all, I would say it's important to have intentionality about it. If you don't have a sense of this being something that's important, and we all know, the wonderful statistics about how boards and companies do better when they have more diverse boards, gender as well as other diversity. So I think, first of all, being intentional about it is critical, and taking the time during board discussions to talk about these issues so that the whole board is engaged in this. But I think then, using broad networks. We all have different networks, and sometimes if we use the networks that got us certain results, they will continue to get us the same results. So we have to think about how do we broaden our networks and use networks of women, people of color, and other networks, along with some of the traditional networks that people already have. I think in several of the boards that I've been on, we have, really used different search firms, and particularly search firms that have a track record of having a portfolio of diverse candidates. So I think all of those are different ways of doing it, but it starts with being intentional and having those discussions so that the whole board is engaged in thinking about how to bring in more women, more people of color, and making the board more diverse.
Thank you. Sanjay, you want to tell us about your effort in attracting a diverse board?
Yeah, well, thank you. Thanks for having me, and congratulations to the leadership and Betsy for the tremendous progress that seemed to have been made over the years, but particularly over last year. So, just to build on what Helene said, I think focus and tone from the top helps. Diversity not just being a nice to do, but an imperative. Talk is cheap. Making it happen is what really matters. And perhaps I'll give an example of Zoetis, which is an animal health company whose board I'm on, which has got a market cap of over $100 billion. We now have 4 women directors out of a total board of 11. And I think the tone of the top has been consistent. We made progress, still a little way to go to get to 50-50. It kind of helps that also our recently appointed CEO, Kristen, she really prioritizes diversity, and this is also in hiring, in key hires in management. So in fact, our new CFO is originally from Haiti. He's just joined. Our chief information and digital officer has just come, and she's from Morocco originally. So it's quite a diverse group from where we started, because Zoetis was actually a spin-off from Pfizer Animal Health. I just saw an announcement today that 2 of our board members have been named amongst the Savoy magazine's most influential Black corporate directors. So we're progress, but still a long way to go. But intentionality, focus, tone from the tone helps.
Same question for you.
So I would just add 2 other things. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. One of the things that you should do if you're currently a board member is that, we should be part of active sponsorship and ardent advocacy, right? This isn't the time to be quiet. And what you can do is you can volunteer to serve on Nom and Gov committees. And even if you have the tenure chair Nom and Gov committees, you have tremendous influence over who's coming to the board. I actively keep lists, right? I'm a list keeper of great candidates. So whether you're part of NACD or Women on Boards or Latin Corporate Directors or the Savoy list that Sanjay just mentioned, I always have lists, because when executive recruiters call me, I always try to leave them with 5 names of people I think would be great for the board. And then the last thing I do on my boards to encourage board turnover, right now I think boards are tending to add directors, but I believe board turnover is healthy. I believe in retirement ages and tenure and robust director evaluations, and that's not always easy. It's easier to add a couple, but it's better, I think, to eventually go down to the right size board and have it also be diverse. And so I've been an ardent supporter of board turnover on the boards that I've been on.
Thank you. One of the key questions that I always get is, how did you get your first board? And what role did networking play in you getting your first board? Christiana, can you tell us a little bit about your first board and whether or not networking was a factor?
Sure. Networking was 100% of the way that I was first connected to a board opportunity. I had retired from a consulting firm, and as a consultant, you're not able to serve on boards just because of conflict, and gone to work at Nike as the COO. And one of my former McKinsey colleagues heard in a conversation another friend saying that they were looking for a director for a public retail company. And they wanted someone who understood retail, which was actually the practice that I led at McKinsey, and who knew how to sail, because this was a boating and water sports retailer. And she also knew that I had taken a sailing class the summer before because my son made me. Not a sailor, but I knew how to sail. So she gave them my name and they called. And, it went through the standard interview process just like everyone. But I never would have known about that opportunity, and they certainly wouldn't have known me because I'd only been out of consulting for a year. If Beth, my colleague, had not put my name in the mix. And I will tell you, it isn't just the first board. Of the 4 public company boards that I've served on so far, 2 of them were through personal connections. So it's still 1 out of every 2 opportunities, at least for me personally, has come through my network. So I agree with everything the other panelists just said. in terms of the importance of connecting into those networks and leveraging them and using them to create the board opportunities for yourself.
Kathleen, how did you get your first board, and what role, if any, did networking play?
So actually, on my first board, I became a public company CEO. So and the board position came through through the career move. But my first independent board seat came through connections on that board. It was to Ashland, and I wanted to serve on another public board. I was a new CEO, and I think it's great experience to see how other boards are run. And so my own board members helped connect me through to Ashland. I would say that I agree, Christiana. Half of my boards, public boards, have come through connections, and half have come through recruiters. But generally, the ones through recruiters, it's because somebody I know recommended me to their list, right? So it's just once removed.
Well, and I just have to say one other thing, Denise. I completely agree with what Kathleen said about giving recruiters names from your network of people who might be qualified for a given search that the recruiter's conducting. I used to not take calls when I felt like I didn't have capacity to add another board. And now, to quote a friend of mine, I take the call, I don't take the job, right? And I have my phantom list that I keep adding and prioritizing of people whose names I want to recommend, because at the moment, sometimes you draw a complete blank when the recruiter's saying, I need someone who's got this or that. And by the way, the top half of my list is all women, because I'm going to start there.
That's great. Sanjay, what role, if any, did networking play in you obtaining your first board position?
Very similar to the others, which is it was I guess try to be lucky, but one had to work hard to be lucky. That was a broad network. It was a combination of people you knew and people, headhunters that you knew. So it was literally through targeted. So I was on the board of Best Buy for many years. And that was, came from, so what's happening now I'm an executive coach, so I actually get this question quite a lot. How can we get into boards? Can you help us get into boards? And the two lessons, other than the networking thing, which is absolutely clear, is I actually, in my coaching, I actually suggest don't get too specific on which industry you want to be part of. Mm-hmm. The idea is to open a lot of doors and keep your options open. Create options, because it's easy to close doors, particularly when you have choices. And the other thing is that I found very exciting now is I've got into a number of private boards. So it doesn't necessarily just have to be public boards. It's a combination of private, public, across different industries. And I'm finding that the more you network, and more targeting the network is, but across a wide, types of industries, you actually find that your skill set can go across industries. It's not confined to whatever you came from, I came from consumer products. And it seems to work pretty well. Progress, but still a long way to go.
So Sanjay gave us some great tips on networking. Helene, can you give us some tips on how to be a better networker? Because everybody uses that term pretty loosely. You got to network. What does that really mean? And what advice would you have to prospective board members about how to get visibility in addition to networking?
Yeah, so I think, first of all, letting people know that you're interested. People can't help you network if they don't know that you're interested. So I think that's number one. I tell people, be an unabashed, promoter for your interest around getting on boards. And, that's how people start being networked. I think it's also similar to what Sanjay said, don't be closed about what networks or what opportunities might be of interest to you, because you just never know which one might lead to the next one. My first board was just like everyone said, as a result of networks, but I didn't end up getting on the very first one that I was being considered for, because they needed somebody with a slightly different background. But then I went into the database of a search firm. So when they did have something that was, more in line with my skills, they called me. So I think it's being open, being open, being obvious, saying that you're very interested, and being broad in terms of both keeping your options open, but also who are you networking with? And, we all have people who are like us or in our industries that we might be more in touch with regularly, but then we all have these extended networks. And so I think thinking about your extended networks as well as those close networks that you're involved in.
Brought diversity to your boards. What impact, if any, has that had, do you think, on discussions and ideas within the boardroom? Christiana, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Impact of having a more diverse board on discussions in the boardroom is significant. I saw it go the other way. For instance, when one of the early boards I joined, the CEO was a woman, and there were 30% of the directors that were women. Over the course of the first year, the CEO retired and was replaced by a man, and one of the female directors retired and was replaced by a man. And suddenly we were in a very different situation. And I noticed that it was harder for everyone to get in the discussion. I noticed that certain people dominated more than they had before. And I really think it's partly because the female CEO and chair had been very good about ensuring that discussions were well distributed and ensuring that even the quieter but very thoughtful female directors were heard from. And it just struck me that it makes such a difference, frankly, to have some safety in numbers. As much as we all are bold, as much as we all speak our mind, there is a dynamic. And when you get in a room with other people and everyone's getting a chance to get their ideas into the mix, you're going to also end up with a more thorough discussion and most likely outcomes or directions that might not otherwise have been surfaced. So it really upped my commitment to making sure that, to the extent that I could, that I was a force for diversity in the boardroom. And to, I think, another point that Kathleen made, that included serving as chair of the governance committee for a while on one of my boards that really needed to update its governance practices and drive some diversity. So when you're in a position to impact, this kind of change, you really have to step up and do it.
Kathleen, can you think of a specific situation that you could share with us where diversity on the board made a difference in decision making?
I can. I'll actually give you a live one right now. It's Lear. And so this is an automotive supplier. It's a Fortune 200 automotive supplier. And about half of our board is diverse. And so there's 3 women, but we have a number of 2 African Americans. We have a Chinese national on the board. And as we went through COVID and identifying all the opportunities and risks in COVID, and particularly around talent, like how do you deal with talent? The overall leadership, not surprising in the automotive industry, a little on the conservative side. And so their idea of work design was, well, we're going to go back to structured work, right, where we're comfortable. And it was the board who said, don't do that, right? You're going to lose talent in a way, even before we actually understood how challenging it was going to be for various groups. Don't do that. Use this as an opportunity to redesign work. And we were so fortunate. Patricia Lewis, who is the CHRO of United Health, is one of our new board members. And so Denise, big advocate of CHROs on boards, actually. She also helped us think through, and we're in the process right now of deep talent, deep dives and focusing lights on diverse talent and giving people new opportunities in order to retain them and redesigning work so there's more flexibility for everybody, right? I mean, it's just, and so this is live right now for us. I think it's one of the top issues boards are facing. We're not done because we're not through all of this. And honestly, COVID just accelerated a generational shift, I think, for a lot of these dialogues, one that I personally think was going to happen anyway, but now it's happening at an accelerated pace. And our dialogue is so much better because we have a diverse board and because the leadership team is now more diverse. Because diversity is like a flywheel. Once you have it, once it gains traction, when people see the different perspectives and the richer conversations, like Christiana was saying, it actually helps them like a magnet attract other diverse talent to both your board and your company.
Great. Helene, you are actually on the board of a number of different companies and a number of different industries. What impact, pick one and tell me just what impact do you think having diversity in the boardroom has had on a decision at one of the companies on whose board you serve?
Well, I think it's had a difference in perhaps two different ways. I think clearly thinking about talent and, looking at issues of equity within the workplace and equity within teams and calling the question around, the pipeline, and are we thinking about what does it take to not only have a diverse pipeline, but also to make sure that the journey within the organization takes into consideration having diverse talent. So I think that these issues of being there and being a bit of an accountability mechanism, if you will, for making sure that these questions get asked and questions around equity and diversity. But I also think it's made a difference in a couple of the companies that I sit on in terms of thinking about other things. Diverse spends, for instance. How are you using your dollars and resources? And are you making a difference in the communities that you work in? And being able to open up opportunities for doing business with diverse suppliers that people may not have been aware of. And so it's another way, I think, the talent within an organization is clear, but also kind of pushing the issues of how are you actually using your spend, and can we be thinking more creatively around that as well? So, I think those are two ways.
Okay. Sanjay, last but not least, what impact do you think having a diverse board has?
Maybe I answer that through an example. So, when I was on the Best Buy board, we got into some pretty serious trouble. Everyone said Best Buy is getting Amazon to death, and the stock price went down to $11. And then I get a call one day that there's an emergency board meeting. And whenever you get a call for an emergency board meeting, it's bad news. And anyway, we were all in this emergency board meeting, and there was some inappropriate behavior of the CEO. We had to be let go in 24 hours. And everyone had previously, and a lot of people had just come from a retail background because that's the way it had grown, and it had done extremely well, except life had changed. So I was part of a 3-person subcommittee of the board appointed to hire a new CEO. The issue was, do you get somebody from a retail background, or do you get somebody outside of retail? And interestingly, we went for a person who had no retail background, who actually had never run a public company before, but was good at turnarounds and good at people management. We, of course, backed him up with Sharon, who's a great CFO, who'd had retail background and had some public company. And right now, he's moved on. The stock price is over $100. It's still work in progress, as all life is, I guess, work in progress. And the current CEO is a female, and she's driving diversity, as I see now, pretty well. So I found that being in any of these boards, if everyone thinks the same way and the board gets cozy, that is an extremely dangerous thing to be in, because that's all you know about. And it's a nice little club. Life is good. And your main thing is that's all you know. That is extremely dangerous, being cozy.
I guess the next question for some of you on the panel is the impact that you think that institutional investors have had in this push to remove historic roadblocks and have more diverse candidates for boards. Christiana, do you think that CalPERS and BlackRock and Goldman Sachs is really having an impact? Or do you think?
Yes, the short answer, Denise, would be yes, and also the rating services. So for the shareholder services, ISS and Glass Lewis. I think between the shareholder services that basically look at a company's proxy every year and then offer recommendations on how you should vote if you're a shareholder, and these very large investors that are portfolio companies that own pretty much, up and down the stock market. I think between them, there's been quite a strong pincer move on boards on a number of ESG issues. And, one of the early ones has been diversity on the board itself. It also has shown a light on their environmental practices, on their people management, talent management, and so on. The reality is that, shareholder interests are pretty important to boards. There's been some broadening of that to be stakeholder interests. So it also helps if employees, have some conversations and dialogue and things like town halls and so on with leadership about the diversity of the leadership of the company. And that includes the boards. But it's absolutely true that when the boards I'm on, when it's time to go and meet with BlackRock or meet with one of the State Street, meet with one of the other large holders of the stock, we know that one of the questions that's going to come up is about the diversity of the board. And if we're not in a good place, what are we doing to get there faster? So I would say it has been an enormous accelerator of diversity on boards. And I think it will continue to grow.
Yeah, and I would just add to that. I mean, I think sometimes we would like to think that we don't need to have external forces to, as you said, accelerate. But I think you use the expression that it's like a flywheel. I think if we get started and boards start having the diversity and start realizing how rich the discussions are, how much different the dialogue is by having that diversity, it becomes reinforcing. But I think sometimes having something that is an accelerant, something that is a little bit of a stick, then the carrot takes over. But I think sometimes you need a little of that external to get the attention, particularly for those who didn't understand the importance of having that diversity. And so once it gets started, I think it is self-reinforcing, but sometimes you need that external pressure to get us all moving.
And I think, Helene, you've seen this as well, I'm sure. Things like the California state law,
exactly,
like the regulations in Europe, right, that they've passed around the European Union. The local governments can actually apply that same external pressure. And yes, to your point, it'd be great when we get to a day where the flywheel's turning. But in the meantime, I think these external sources of pressure are effective.
Price Waterhouse just did a survey, anonymous, obviously, because in the boardroom, the push by investors and the state regulations have really, I think, really upped the quality of the conversation around DEI. But there is quiet backlash from some. And just to quote a couple stats, so 63% of directors think investors are too focused on gender and racial diversity, up from 35% a year ago. And 58% report the same with racial and ethnic diversity, up about double a year ago. And so it's not very comfortable for the traditional directors, right? We should know that right now. This is why it's important to have investors be vocal, to have the states proceed with what they're doing. I wish this would happen through spontaneous combustion, but I've been in business for over 45 years, haven't seen it happen that way yet. And I just think that there does need to be some forcing functions. Now, I do think we'll get over a hump, because one of the things that's happened on my more diverse boards is even what I would say are the more traditional directors are happy with the quality. They're now comfortable, right? They're over that hump. They're now comfortable. They see the quality of the conversation. They see the incredible competence people bring to the table. But I'm on some private boards too, which aren't quite at that stage yet. And you can see they're still grappling with going from informal networks, which are generally homogeneous, to expanding their networks to a more diverse world. And I think these are necessary right now, as well as advocacy by groups like the one that we're part of here today with this 50-50 Women on Boards.
Thank you. Betsy gave us some great statistics about improvements in the board compositions for companies in the Midwest. But at the end of her presentation, she talked about really the dismal statistics with respect to people of color and women of color. Helene, what do you think how should people of color position themselves to advance in the pipeline to be considered for boards? Do you have any tips that you could give to our listeners today, our participants today who are of color and look at these stats and get actually a bit discouraged? So any tips that you would have for them to get visibility and to get on a board actually?
Well, I think some of the same things that we've talked about for women work for people of color. Expanding your networks, making sure that you're being clear with people who you know are on boards, that you're interested in a board. I also tell people, join a nonprofit board, just like Sanjay was talking about the private and public boards. Sometimes getting on a large nonprofit board, a hospital board, or other nonprofits, but that operate kind of at scale or operate complex nonprofits, give you that experience and open you up to opportunities. And by the way, most nonprofit boards are filled with people who, their day jobs are corporate or company jobs. So it's another way of building your networks. And one of the things I've done here in Chicago is we pulled together a group of women of color on boards, and we're both helping to expand our networks, but also to bring in women who aren't yet on boards, but who are board ready. So I think there's a lot of ways in which networking, again, the same sort of networking that we talk about for women can be used for women of color, people of color more broadly. But I do think that some of the things that we've seen work for women, like as we were talking about, some of the external forces are going to be necessary to make some of the same sort of change with people of color. And so I don't think it's obviously not an easy road. The numbers are still less than satisfying. So I think that, some of the same push, and we're starting to see that now from the investors who are putting a big focus on gender diversity, now starting to put a greater focus on race and ethnic diversity. And I think that's going to be helpful as well.
Well, I mean, just build on what Helene said. So I'm a professor at Northwestern University, and we run a program. One of the programs we run is for minority businesses. And we just did one. I just did a few classes for minority businesses in the Chicagoland area. And after the class, some of the people who were in my class reached out and saying, "What do you think? How can you help us get onto boards?" And I said exactly what Helene said. We tried not-for-profit, and others, and private, because if you're trying to get only the big ones, then you feel frustrated because it takes a long time. People don't return calls. It's not a bad idea broadening your network by starting with, as I said, not-for-profit and other type of boards which are private. And some of them have actually done that, and it's been pretty cool because the folks who've actually got in, it's just the diversity and different points of view helps, but that just helps broaden the network, to the comments earlier made.
And maybe, Denise, I'll add just a couple other really pragmatic things for everyone who's trying to raise their visibility. One is take a look at your LinkedIn from the perspective of someone that's searching for a director, whether it's private or it's public, and see if your value proposition as a potential director comes through, right? A lot of us didn't update our LinkedIn for years because we were in the same role and we weren't looking for a job. Well, LinkedIn is where so many recruiters and so many boards that do direct search start. They actually go in there and start searching for skills and competency and experience, et cetera. So, one of the first things I ask people are, when's the last time you updated your LinkedIn? And, for a lot of us, it's kind of a pause. And also, if you haven't looked at it from the perspective of a potential director seat, you may not be putting forward the kind of skills, that boards are looking for.
And just one more idea, with all the tech going on, I've been in the startup world for a long time, startup and growth, and they always, they start up by paying you in equity, so you're not going to make a lot of money initially. But these are boards that, particularly if you've got certain skills where you can help a young company, identify market and product capabilities and scale. These are great opportunities to serve on advisory boards. You'll learn about capital raising. You'll learn about capital markets, which if you're in large companies, you may not have been exposed to, which is really valuable on it, as you scale. And you can contact universities. I'm sure Sanjay at Northwestern, all universities have venture capabilities and incubators. Your cities probably do too. And if you contact them and volunteer, this is another way to get board experience in the middle of your career.
By the way, just to build on Kathleen, your comment, one of the boards which I've had the most fun professionally, personally, was actually a startup by a professor at Northwestern who he's a geek. He's an engineering, and he said, can you convert this into a business? It was just so much fun. And it's a startup. So we are 3 people and we just sold that company a little while back. But we were about 200 people, but that was just great fun. But that's where actually, even on that board, we got, we had this person who was the CEO of Verizon, and we decided to get her on board just to get diversity, but also she came from a technology background, which kind of helped, and that changed the dynamic in the whole room. It was actually quite brilliant. And we also enjoyed ourselves a lot.
You guys have made my job so much easier. All the tidbits of information that you're giving and practical advice, and I really hope our participants are taking notes and learning from you. And so as we think about closing today, is there one additional thing that you could share, each of you could share with someone who is board ready, has attended seminars and lots of things to get them ready, like one piece of advice that something that could give them an edge? I hope each of you will have something different. Colleen, can we start with you?
Well, I think know your worth and your value and what you have to offer. Because I think sometimes, people think about what skills are necessary on a board, and we have the traditional thinking of a CEO or a CFO. But as several of the panelists have said, there's a wide range of skills that are necessary today on different kinds of boards. So I think being really clear about what you think you bring to the table, what you think you have to offer, and being really affirmative about that, I think is very helpful. And you help to stretch the thinking of those who are recruiting by coming with, having a good understanding of what you have to contribute, along with all the other things that we've said, including, as I say, raising your hand is an important first step. And oftentimes people think, I shouldn't be that forward, but raise your hand, be affirmative, know what your value is, and continuing the network.
Yana, you got to beat that.
Did you say me? Sorry, you were cut off at the beginning. Yeah. I would say if you're working in an environment where you have other senior leaders who can help recommend you for boards, or where you can include that as part of your own talent development plan for yourself, I would do that. Because one of the things we're getting more engaged in as a board is looking at, the couple of levels of talent below the CEO and saying, what are the talent development plans that the company has for each of them, with a particular focus on women and diverse talent. And very often, one of the things that's recommended is so-and-so should get on a board, that will give them more of a sense of, a 360 view of capital markets, of what it's like to, to make decisions at a board level, et cetera. If the board or your CEO says, we think you ought to be on a board, then the thing you ought to say right back is, great, how can you help? Right? Because so many times it's CEO to CEO or senior leader to senior leader, director to director, where these referrals come up. So if that's part of your talent plan or your development, engage your company, your peers, your leadership, if there are those above you, to help you find those opportunities, because they can.
Sanjay?
I was in a call this morning, and she's a person of color. She was underselling herself. And what I basically said is, look, I mean, you're much better than you think you are. Package yourself a little better in terms of just, you got skills which are actually unique. Why are you so shy? And so I kind of helped almost craft, her, what's so great about her. And then, we ended the conversation by saying, it's just the beauty of being yourself, but don't undersell yourself.
And lastly, Kathleen?
Sure. When you're fourth, it's hard to beat, because I agree with all of these tips, but I'll give you one more. Shareholder proxies are incredibly rich sources of information now as boards add demographic and skills matrices to these proxies. So it's not just for like legal reading to go to sleep at night anymore. So you should do your own demographic and skills matrix and benchmark, pick some companies that you're interested in and fill it out yourself to see how you would fit in these companies. 1, 2, I totally agree with what Helene said. Raise your own hand. You shouldn't wait till executive recruiters call or even that your network responds. If you target some companies you're interested in, send your information to Head of Nom and Gov, to the lead director, to the CEO. Advocate for yourself. The window is open now for diversity on boards, and boards are trying to increase their scope in terms of who they look for. So if you're ready to be on a board, it couldn't be at a better time.
Well, thank you all. I've learned a few things today as well. I think it's just been a rich discussion, lots of practical advice. So thank you so much for taking the time to make my job as moderator so easy. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise.
It's been a pleasure, you guys.
Great.
Okay, and I think we have coming back Jennifer, and Jennifer's going to close us out here with our program before we move on to the director coach sessions. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Denise, and thank you, panelists. That was just phenomenal. I learned so much, and I hope you all learned too. Just the profound difference, just some really great practical advice, and then just some really inspiring, things. Diversity is a flywheel. I will just take that away, and I think that's going to be my bumper sticker, because I just think that is great and would learn so much. But thank you for all of your insights, and don't worry. Now we've got, even more deep conversations, because we can now go to transition to the breakouts. But before we do that, I just want to remind you all that on November 19th at 11 a.m. Pacific, there's another event. So we'll see you all then. And then don't forget to sign up for the Get On Board workshops the week of December 6th. And the pathway to the board is December 16th. And I just want to thank our sponsors and our committee and 50/50 Women on Boards and our esteemed panelists. And now, without further ado, it's time to transition to the breakouts. Thank you all.